Hey watch friends, after revising the Resolute, RZE has decided to update another one of their models. This is the Endeavour. This was the follow-up to the Resolute, so it makes sense to bring this back as a version 2. As we'll see throughout this video, it stayed more true to the original than the Resolute update did. However, the main thing that this is packing is that crazy dial update, and we'll talk about that as we go through. Before we dive into this watch, let's just go ahead and take a quick look at the now familiar RZE packaging. As you can see, the zipper pouch here, Velcro on the outside, there's one of their patches, and then on the inside, you've got the slot holders. Alright, so now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive straight into this model, explore it. It's one that's familiar. If you've seen this in the past, you know all about the original Endeavour model, and this one's going to be very true to that original. This is still going to come with RZE's 2-year warranty. The case dimensions are going to be the same, measured from roughly the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock position, so right inside of those grooves, it's coming in at 39.6 millimeters, so right at the 40 millimeter mark, especially considering the protrusions that it has at the 3 and 9 o'clock. The bezel does step down from the 2 to 8, and that is coming in at 39.4. However, as you can see, it's close to flush with the case itself, where it comes out there at the 3 to 9. The lugs are still going to be a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is still only 45.9 millimeters, so nice and versatile there, especially with the female end links that we'll explore. This has a total thickness of 12.5 millimeters. Really not too bad, and I actually think it wears thinner than that on the wrist, but 12.5 isn't anything to scoff at for a dive style watch anyways. The crystal is a flat sapphire crystal, and it does have an inner AR coating. I find their AR coating actually performs quite well. As you can see here, it does pick up some glare and reflection. However, it doesn't ever wash out the dial, at least in my usage or experience, and that's true with the original that I still own that we'll look at later on as well. As far as the movement, this is coming with the venerable Seiko NH35. Great workhorse movement. It's going to be a lower beat movement, but it does have hacking, hand winding, so of course an automatic, all that kind of good stuff. And it's very reliable and also very inexpensive if you need to replace it. As far as the water resistance, you can see at the 6 o'clock position, this is 200 meters or 20 atmospheres, which I think is suitable for a everyday dive style watch. The weight. This is one of the claims to fame of RZE. This is going to be true to the rest of their lineup. This is a full titanium construction, and just like the original, it's what I'd call a featherweight. This is coming in size to my 6.5 inch wrist at 103.7 grams. So really, it's one that definitely disappears on the wrist. You really don't notice it at all, other than when you look down and see that sweet dial. Which, speaking of the dial, let's go ahead and now that we have the basic specs out of the way, dive in further and see what else this is offering. This is coming available in 4 colors. So there's the teal blue that we're looking at today. There's additionally a white version, a light blue version, and a dark blue version. Each of these is going to be in keeping with the name of this collection or the update, which is the Glacier series. So with that, you have what I would describe as almost being like a Grand Seiko carved bark texture across the dial. Though of course you could see that being reminiscent to kind of cracks in ice as well in the uneven, icy terrain, which I think is a really cool look, and I think it's very well executed here. Definitely adds some intrigue versus the original, again, which we'll check out this next to. As far as the coloration, on this particular teal variant, it's quite vibrant. You know, it's somewhat of a green, somewhat of a blue. It's not really even true to a teal. It's hard to really pin down what color this actually is, and it's one that I really doubt that this is going to render appropriately on camera or on your screen, because there's always color variation there. But that being said, it's a really unique shade and not one that I have in my collection. I've got a pretty extensive teal and blue collection. The dial is going to be very similar in that it has still your printing at the 12 o'clock as well as the 6 o'clock position with their logo, and then the text with automatic as well as the water resistance. Out on the perimeter, you do still have the chapter ring, which is going to have your individual hashes as well as your more bold for the 5-minute increments, with of course the 12 o'clock as well as the 3, 6, and 9 differing from the other 5-minute increments there. This one does change up in that at the 3 o'clock position, you do have a framed date window. That was something I believe was available on later Endeavours. However, that was not available on the original batches, which is what we'll look at, is the no date version. Very prominent there, and it's very consistent with the original model of the Resolute that featured that as well. As far as the hardware, this is still going to be, again, very similar. You have a satin pencil style handset for the hour and minute, and then you do have a lollipop for your second hand. And again, that texture is going to be, or that finishing is going to be a satin. So it adds nice contrast, I feel, for against this dial. So it's very legible, especially with the Loom accents, which as you can see here on camera, even with just the slightest bit of sunlight hitting it, it does pick up with the Loom and very much pop there. And we'll look at that further as we go through as well. As far as the markers, these are, again, carrying through with the baton style markers. Of course, the 3 o'clock with having that frame date window is no longer there. But you do have a very bold at the 12 o'clock, so a double baton. Then you have the skinnier baton that's consistent all the way through, with the exception of your 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, where it carries over just like the prior, where it has the dual Loom accent. So during the day, you can see the different coloration of the greenish of C3 as well as the BGW9, but mainly it really kind of differentiates there as far as the configuration and layout, and I think that's a nice accent touch. So we've already talked about it, but the Loom on this, as you can see, carries through with the pattern that we saw during the day as well. Nice mix of C3 and BGW9. The Loom really does pop and endure quite nicely, so really nothing to complain about there. The same thing's true of the prior models as well, and it really just stays true to what we expect in the past. As far as the bezel on this, and this is one of the claims of fame of RZE models across the board, this is going to be a full titanium construction, so your bezel is in keeping with that. But this specifically, though, is a coated titanium. They have what they refer to as their Ultra Hex coating, which you might have seen on the patch that we looked at earlier. The Ultra Hex coating takes it up to 1200 Vickers of scratch resistance, so that's an excellent touch there in that it will help to keep these durable watches looking like new for longer. And we'll talk about those aspects as we go through. As far as the bezel itself, it is a coin edge construction, and it's a true coin in that it has an undercut there, so it actually looks like the side of a quarter when you see kind of just floating out there. So it has that pronounced undercut, and then it does protrude out a little bit, and it comes close to flush with the case, just the case is a little bit proud there at the 3 and 9, and then again recessed at the 2 and 8, as you can see there. I'm sorry, protrudes rather slightly. The case is recessed rather at the 2 and 8 position. As far as the bezel itself, it does have a very subtle curve, or a slope rather, to that insert, as you can see there. So it almost looks flat, however it does have that little bit just going up to the crystal, and I think that's a nice touch as well. The actual bezel insert has clean numerals all the way around. As you can see, it stays very uniform, and I like that. And additionally, I'm a big fan of this black enamel finish up against the titanium. I think that's a great look. And then, of course, you have the pip at 12 o'clock with the triangle there to help to differentiate that. As far as the bezel action, this is similar to the prior Endeavour. You can hear nice tactile click to it. It is, I would say, pretty consistent with titanium. It's a little bit more tinny than a stainless steel would be, but it's a nice action. It's a pretty tactile overall. Has very little play to that. Alignment has been good on this sample, and I should mention this is actually a prototype that was loaned into the channel. So take that for what it's worth. There, production should be even better than this, but overall, I think this performs well. As far as the case, again, this is one that's going to be very consistent with the prior that we looked at. It carries through the exact same characteristics that we saw in the past. Just like the Resolute model, which does share this case as well. It's going to be very angular, and it has almost like a Henta-like presence where it kind of protrudes out at the 3 and 9 for that, but very angular cuts. Everything is softened though, so you don't have any actual sharp edges. It just has that very sharp appearance to it, which I think is a cool look. It's one that sold me on the Resolute to begin with, then I picked up the Endeavour, and then here we are with yet another Endeavour, so I still like it. As far as the case itself, it does have nice pronounced downturns, and as you can see, it's relatively flush with the case back as well, so that's a nice touch. As I'm sure you picked up on, it does have drilled lug holes as well, so that makes for nice easy strap changes, though we'll see this has quick release spring bars on the back as well. In between, you're going to have flat lug profile, so that makes this great for if you want to throw on a strap. You don't need a curved strap to be able to fit nicely in there, so that's a good touch. And then shifting over to the 3 o'clock side, it still carries through with that integrated crown guard as well. So that's nice and tucked in there, which again, keeping with the adventure style and the durability there, I think that's a good touch also. As far as the crown itself, this is still going to be coming in at 7.3 millimeters. It is a screw-in construction, as you'd expect for the dive styling. As far as the finish on this, it is what I would describe as like a gear cut. I think it's pretty consistent with the coin edge of the bezel, but it's wider in there, and I think aesthetically it fits well and they blend together, and I actually prefer this finishing overall for the crown, just as I do like the coin edge on the bezel itself, and I think they play nicely. As far as the outside, you can see It does have a nice signature there, as with other RZE models, always cleanly applied, well machined, and it's kind of the reverse there where it pops up, so that's a nice touch there. Shifting over to the caseback. The caseback on this is very consistent across the RZE lineup. It's a relatively plain caseback. It is an uncoated titanium construction. So as you'll see, this prototype does have scratches and scuffs across the back, just as we recently saw on the Aspie Rare as well. It does have minimal text going around the perimeter there, and again, it's just very in keeping with the kind of no-frills aesthetic that RZE presents with their casebacks. It's something I wouldn't mind seeing changed up in the future, but really, honestly, it's the back of the case. There's nothing really to complain about there, and this is really intended to be kind of a functional do-all watch overall. Shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet on this is, again, going to be consistent with the past. It has a 20 millimeters at the lugs, but does taper clear down to 16 millimeters at the clasp. It still carries through with the original female end links, and it does have an H-link construction as you go down through that. The finish and texture is still going to be blasted, just as we saw in the past as well. The articulation and drape, it really does hug nicely to the wrist. So between the light weight of the bracelet as well as the excellent articulation of the H-links, really nothing to complain about there. It was a great bracelet. It's one that I highly recommended when it was optional on the Resolute. They then started including it in the Endeavour, which I think was a good call because I think everybody is going to want this bracelet. Whether you're a bracelet person or not, it's something you'll definitely want to have in the rotation there. These still are going to be held in with screws, so nice, easy changes there. If you do need a screwdriver, I will have one link down in the description. Highly recommend having a good quality screwdriver, as well as I actually have a video kind of walking you through how to avoid buggering those up. Highly encourage you to watch that as well. One of the biggest updates that this is going to have is on this newer version. This was one of the Achilles heels of the original Resolutes and some of the prior models in Endeavour as well, and that is they added a toeless micro-adjust clasp. I think that's much more in keeping with the industry as kind of what to expect, especially at the price point that we'll talk about. This is a double pusher construction, so you push that in. You can see it carries through with that blasted finish. It is signed there with kind of an embossed signature. It's milled on the inside, but then the biggest thing is it has this toeless micro-adjust in the middle. You can see this is similar to like the Christopher Ward or Zelos that we've looked at in the past. Different, but it is similar construction. So you just push that button in, and then you can pull that, and it's all the way out there. Clicks in, that gives you an idea. Looks very true to the bracelet, and then you can push that in, and again, you're not going to be able to tell a difference. And then I should note, this is actually a ratcheting style as well. So you can, while you have that on wrist, you can close that up as well. So that's a nice touch there. And then, as I already mentioned, this does have quick release spring bars on the back. That's a great aspect and feature there. So in conjunction with the drilled lugs, you don't have to worry about being able to easily change out the straps with those 20 millimeter straps. Excellent there. All right, so now that we have a better feel for this updated model, let's go ahead and bring in some comps and see really kind of what's changed up. First, this is the original Endeavour here, so this is from their very first batch. You can see, of course, an extremely similar aesthetic. The main things you're going to notice are what we've already talked about is going to be the dowel texture. Huge difference there between this blast or sand type texture versus this kind of carved bark texture. And then similarly with having the date window at the 3 o'clock, the framed date window there, very different aesthetic for that. And I will talk about that further. Next, bringing in, this is one of their other models. This is the Fortitude, and as you can see here, this one's a little bit larger, so I'm kind of going in size progression. So this is a 41 millimeter, gives you an idea there between the fixed bezel as well as the slightly larger size as far as just how these two wear in kind of comparison between those. And then finally bringing in the big boy, we saw this in the Aspie Rare side by side as well, but you can see this one just absolutely dwarfs it. 44 millimeters versus the 40 millimeters. Here you can see so much more presence on this one as you'd expect. This one fits my 6.5 inch wrist a heck of a lot better, as we saw there in wrist footage and saw previously on the Aspie Rare video, but did want to bring that back in for the larger wristed folks. Alright, so there you have it. You should hopefully have now a better feel for the overall model. Let's wrap things up with my view of the positives, the critiques, as well as the summary. Most of these are going to carry through, again, being pretty consistent with the prior model. Not much has changed there. As far as the positives, I really like the new dowel textures. I like the original as well. I still appreciate the original for its kind of no frills, just adventure styling. But this bark Grand Seiko type texture I think is very attractive as well, and I like the light play that it gets. One of the biggest things that is true of all the different RZE models, especially on the original series here with the Resolute and the Endeavour, is they're extremely light, extremely comfortable. So they're just a pleasure to wear all the way around, so really like that. And then similarly, the durability. despite the fact that these are titanium, they've held up extremely well. As you saw there, my other Endeavour still looks pretty much like new, and that's especially owing to that hardened coating, which helps to keep scratches off of the bracelets there and off the case as well. So I've really been pleased with that. As far as the critiques, for me, I really just have two with this one as far as the pieces. Some of the others were individual for the original Endeavour. The biggest thing is going to be that frame date window. I gotta say, I'm partial to the no date variant. That's just going to be a subjective. If it was going to have a date, I like the integration they did at the 6 o'clock where it's just kind of a porthole with some of the other models. However, with that being said, I'm not a huge fan of that frame date window. It was something I never really loved on the Resolute. I always kind of looked past that aspect, but I think it was a little more fitting on the field style than it is in this dive style. So that's just a subjective piece there, but it's one that I'm not hugely crazy about. The other thing is the pricing. Now that this is past the launch, because I'm a little bit late to the party here, this is coming in at $549. That does include the bracelet for it, so that is the braceleted model. But at $549, it's getting to be, I would say this is kind of a neutral for me. Not really a critique, but it is getting into a very competitive zone, and I will say, for that price point, there are some other ones that you can get for a little bit cheaper or around the same price that also are titanium, have a hardened coating, have a Miyota 9 series instead of the NH, which is a little more expensive of a movement there. So overall, I think it's relatively price competitive, but I will say it's slightly on the higher side compared to some of the comps that are out there. So I still think you get a great watch for the money. I don't think it's overpriced, but I would be remiss if I didn't point that out. As far as the summary, at the end of the day, it's basically the same exact feedback I had previously. This one, if you're looking for a great go everywhere, do everything kind of watch, I think this stays to the origins. I'm glad they didn't really change it up because I don't really think it needed to be tweaked. In the areas they did change, with the exception of the date, really that dial and the toolless micro adjust, I absolutely love those. I think the dial texture is really cool. I think people are going to be very pleased whichever color you go with. And then similarly, the addition of the toolless micro, you can't go wrong there. So if you like this in the past, or if this is one you thought about pulling the trigger on but never did so, I definitely encourage you to go ahead and snag one now. So there you have it. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy it, please do tap that like button. Additionally, if you haven't already done so, give that subscribe button a tap there. We'll always have new content coming. And then drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you like this one? Which one's your favorite? Do you prefer the original style? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.